Hey everyone, can everyone hear me? Great. There's a little bit of a delay, um, so I'm going to be fighting that all night, I'm sure. And so, thank you all for being here. There's a ton of you here, and I was wondering, when we plan this, like how many kids are going to show up and how many coaches are going to show up on July 7th to talk about a American Gothic novel in the middle of their summer. And so, thank you so much for being here. This should be fun. Only planned for about 45 minutes. I figure that's all we need for kind of getting through the big parts of Wieland, which is how I pronounce it. I don't know. It's just the first thing my eyes saw when I saw the book. I was like, okay, I'm just going to pronounce it that way. It doesn't matter. So, hopefully you've been enjoying the, uh, I would say, slightly better than mediocre memes on Wieland for the past 24 hours. There's a lot to make fun of in this book, and we haven't even really gotten to some of the more absurd stuff that happens later. Lots of death and kind of insanity comes along, both literal and metaphorical. Um, so it's very cool to see all of you here. I see lots of Dobie, Irving, Reedy, Deer Park. The rest of you, if you haven't let me know, go ahead and tell me where you're from. I like seeing that, just how far around the state we're getting, um, and also kind of helps me. And is there a coach uh, in the audience that wouldn't mind being the chat moderator? That would be very helpful. Um, so just let me know in the chat if you're a coach and if you'd be willing to be the moderator there. So you can just keep an eye on the chat. I'm doing so as well, but just in case I miss something, we need to kick somebody out or put somebody in a timeout or something that we can do that. So this meme is probably my favorite. Poor Clara. You're going to get a lot of making fun of Claire in these memes since she's our narrator, and we have to see pretty much everything through her eyes. Thank you, Tim. I'm adding you as a moderator now, and so you can kind of keep an eye on that. And I really appreciate it. So let's go ahead and get started. I encourage you to participate in the chat. I do have it set to slow mode. So you can only do one post in the chat per 20 seconds. If you can't post in the chat, it's probably because you're not one of our subscribers on our channel. So make sure you go do that real quick. And then I think it takes about a minute for it to click in. And then you'll be able to post questions chat. We have some questions at the end for you to answer. Um, and I think probably one lucky person, I will send my notes on Wieland to. Maybe one lucky person who answers the right question, I will send you over my notes that I've been taking as I read. And actually, this will be my second read of Wieland. And so, yeah, participate in the chat. If you have questions as we go through this and have questions about the book, about what the heck does this mean or what is she talking about, feel free. I have my copy of Wieland right here, ready to go, and we'll figure this book out. I know it's kind of a dense book. That's pretty normal for this time period and for Gothic literature. But I will even admit, I pretty much read for a living, and it took me about 3-ish chapters, 4-ish chapters to get into it. And then at a certain point, I just kind of enjoy the ridiculousness of it at times. Um, and so, yeah, it is sad. It is dark. Thanks, Cody. But some of the plot points, if you finish the whole book, as I have, I'm going to do my best not to spoil things for you because there are some surprises at the end. Um, so try not to spoil it for other people unless they just ask you to. That's fine, I guess. But yeah, so let's get started. So let's talk about the questions first I had for you. Yeah, see, by the way, I see tons of Irving people. So very cool to have you here, Irving people. Hebron there, Marcus, great. Once again, awesome. So what are your big takeaways about the characters? Who are your favorite characters? Um, who's annoying you the most. That tends to happen in these Gothic novels and these very kind of sensationalist type novel. This isn't a sensationalist novel. That's a little later, but there tends to be characters that annoy people. Um, but what characters are you, rooting for? What characters, uh, you know, who do you find likable? Who are you worried about? Where's the danger coming? You don't enjoy Carwin? Well, that's I think pretty much supposed to be. It's. We'll talk about the day that Brown leaves you no question about who to worry about at the very beginning, right, Carwin? Given the description, we'll talk about that description today. Jay Pleyel's your favorite. Well, he is the logical, whimsical one, at least first before gets the bad news. And Clara's monologues are pretty tiring. Yeah, that's pretty normal though for this time period. So, yeah. And Adam, I get you. This time period, Gothic novels aren't always everyone's favorite thing. I will say that 19th century Gothic novels are much more interesting than the 18th century variety. Um, okay, Amy likes Carwin, which there's a lot of interest there. Yeah, there's a lot of weirdness going on, and trust me, Amy, it's only going to get weirder with Carwin as we go on. So yeah, and then the brother, deep, morose, brooding brother Theodore Wieland. Yeah, so lots of votes for Pleyel there, and it's pretty typical. He's the fun-loving guy, the guy you'd probably want to have with you at the temple. Probably not Theodore. He seems like pretty much kind of like a downer. But yeah, so I think we pretty much already figured out who the danger. And as if you saw the last meme I posted, um, Brown kind of gives the story away uh, on that page and with Carwin's kind of explanation for things if you're really paying attention. But most people don't pay attention to that through the first read. And so Claire is the most realistic one. Yeah, especially for the 1700s, that kind of female character is probably, very strained in, very little she can do, very concerned about what other people think about her. So, yeah. Brooke, welcome from Bandera. Your coach is a great guy. Spent a lot of time with him. So, let's go ahead and get to kind of the overview of this. And hopefully you've read the book, and hopefully you've at least kind of skimmed through this part of the guide. Is first off, what is Gothic? What does that mean? I keep calling it a Gothic novel. Um, Anybody want to kind of venture? What are the things you know already that kind of denotes a Gothic story? Um, Something that you know it's called Gothic. And I know you're not supposed to drink on camera, but my throat's awful scratchy. Old houses, big landscape, sinister forces. Yeah, creepy, dark. This is what, kind of in a modern sense, we would call like a scary movie. Lots of mystery going on, ghosts, not really horror, but mystery and scary. Ghost, there's almost always kind of a big house that's a part of this. Not in this one, although we do kind of get a mysterious structure in the temple. But in this, normally there's some kind of supernatural events. Of course, we've already seen at least one of them, right, with the Elder Wieland and what happens to him. It's also a lot about the past coming back to haunt the present. And so we already kind of see a little bit of this with Theodore being kind of bothered by the death of his father and what happened there. And he feels like that's going to come back on him, and he shares in that lineage. That's very often with Gothic novels, is the past is kind of coming back and seeking vengeance on the present. There's always weird occurrences, light sounds. Of course, we have that here, right? We already have disembodied voices all over the place that no one could figure out who they are or what they're coming from, but they seem to be helping, kinda. And so there's a question there of what's going on. One of kind of the other key parts of a Gothic novel, and if you read more literature in high school or if you go when you go to college, you'll see this with other Gothic novels. Is there's always a like kind of pure, good-natured female heroine in these stories. and clearly that's Clara. And so here she's going to play that role. And with each of these Gothic stories, the pure, good-hearted feminine character is always kind of being preyed upon by a person of low moral character or a fiend. And of course, Brown kind of already gives that away of who that is because we see how Clara reacts to, oh, I've got to bring this guy up now. And like she wrings her hands for like half a page about, oh, I don't want to talk about him, but I have to. And it makes me so upset to talk about him. And then she goes on for like 2 or 3 pages describing him. Um, so yeah, Carwin's that guy. And he is the fiend that we have to look out for. Kinda. So we'll see. And so that's what a Gothic novel is, and and you see a lot of these same tropes in modern scary movies, right? The pure feminine character, the one that's good of heart, being chased by a fiend, just usually more in a literal sense in modern movies. And oh, by the way, Ace Rack, yes, it will be its own video after the stream. And so we see that in modern movies. But that is kind of the part of the Gothic. No, that's already normal. I can't be that. Well, he doesn't. He doesn't. He doesn't stay happy for long. So yeah, and so that is one of the big things about this novel is that Gothic aspect is all the elements, and you'll see it throughout the book. And so as you're reading further, be on the lookout for Clara's purity. Be on the lookout for thunderstorms. Be on the lookout for any kind of strange noise or lights or anything like that. That's pretty Gothic. Dark and stormy, shadows. Of course, that's easy back in the 1700s because the only light they had were lanterns, and that doesn't really light a room fully, and so it's easy to be dark and mysterious back then. And so the other theme, this is going to be alien versus belonging, and hopefully you already caught on to that with how they talk about Carwin and Carwin's background, and how Pleyel meets Carwin. Now, Pleyel meets Carwin when he's in Spain, and they're really kind of weirded out by Carwin's background because he is English, which is acceptable, but then he becomes Spanish, like in behavior and language. He even converts to Catholicism, and that really confuses them. Like, they don't understand why Carwin would want to do that. It doesn't make any sense. And so they try to come up with all these different reasons why Carwin would do this. Was it political? Was he running for something? And so that alien aspect, it's almost like he doesn't belong. And Claire kind of makes that point when she's describing him in that, look, I see this character every day on the street, the way he's dressed and the way he walks, everything else, but he just doesn't seem to fit. And so that kind of aspect of the way he's described kind of lets us know that while they accept him, he doesn't quite belong. And yeah, Savannah, he will not explain to them why he left Spain either, right? Like, he's totally dodging every question that comes his way about, oh, why'd you leave Spain? Or how'd you end up in Spain? Like, oh, well, it's a long story. Let's talk. Yeah, that's clearly suspicious. Brown does not do a good job of kind of hiding that suspicion, and I'm not even sure he was trying. But you clearly get a sense that something's up with Carwin, that he doesn't quite fit, and especially that Catholicism aspect. And that's very normal for the 1700s American idea of changing religions from Protestantism to Catholicism in the 1700s would have been incredibly strange for people to kind of process. And so that is right out of the way. I always think about when you're reading these novels, from this time period, they're written by someone who lived in the time period and read by people in the time period, and they were meant to be read by those people. You don't write something expecting kids 200 years from now to be reading it for a test. You write it for like at the time period, so he puts that in there as a big clue to people like, ooh, this is mysterious and weird. What's wrong with him? Whereas today, if someone converted from Protestantism to Catholicism, it wouldn't raise our eyebrows the way it did in the 1700s. Yes, DFW there. Dreams foreshadowing reality are a big part of Gothic as well. Lots of dream interpretation and things that may be dreams but not dreams or hallucinations. It's all part of that supernatural aspect. So that alien versus belonging part is a big thing here, and that is the one thing that I think Brown does do a good job. If you haven't read the whole thing, if you've only read it to like chapter 8 or 9, the belonging versus where the danger is, there is going to be a twist there. So that is part of it. Conway is also a good example. Alien was one that says she's technically not a Wieland, but it's a separate family. Yeah, okay, so let's deal with Luisa Conway right now, since God Emperor King of the Kingship of Nerds brought it up. Great name, by the way. Okay, look, she is absolutely going to end up on ACTEC test. You can count on it, but she has no bearing on the story whatsoever. And I say this as someone who's read the entire book now twice. Yeah, so don't get your hopes up there. I think one of the memes I made was of that. Basically, look, I don't know how to tell you this, but her entire backstory and that B plot has no bearing on anything. It's a big confusion, even in some of the articles that I read about this book, kind of in preparation for this. Like, scholars are like, who knows why you put it in there? Like, it doesn't serve any real purpose. In fact, when you get to the end of the book, you'll see that Brown kind of has to quickly tie that up to even make it make sense. So I'm not exactly sure what is going on there. Davey asks, I don't think I fully understand where Luisa comes from. Basically, her mother fled Europe for some unknown reason that I think we kind of find out a little bit at the end why. And is in the care of this lady with her daughter. Luisa's mom dies, and then Luisa says, well, as happens in the 1700s, they're orphans. Like, oh, here, go live with this family. You can be part of their family. And yeah, that was pretty typical for the 1700s. Orphans would go live with other families from good families, and you just became part of the family. It was pretty normal. And so Luisa goes and lives with Theodore and Catherine and becomes part of their family. Totally normal, except for she serves no purpose in the plot. So I don't know what to tell you on there. Nope. Luisa's father isn't even significant. I know. I know you want like, oh, surely this matters. No, it doesn't. Again, he'll show up at the end. I don't want to ruin it for you as a kind of a tie up loose ends. But yeah, if you get to the end of the book, when we do this last one of these in 2 weeks, if you have an idea of like, oh, this is exactly why Brown put her in the book and put the dad in the book, feel free to give me the explanation, but no one else has come up with an idea. So, all good theories. When you finish the book, you'll be just as disappointed as I am that your theory's not right. So, national identity is another theme. This one's not a very subtle metaphor here. We're talking about two young people whose parents basically are killed off and left to their own devices in this kind of agrarian pleasantness. And thanks to the work of slaves and their father's industriousness, that's clearly a metaphor for America. And of course, you get the outsiders coming in. They kind of spoil this. And so that's not a very subtle metaphor. So, and then, of course, the big one is rationalism versus faith. And this is the Pleyel versus Theodore. I'm going to refer to him as Theodore just so I don't get you confused with the Elder Wieland, who I will call the Elder Wieland. But Theo Wieland, the brother. Theo is the symbol of faith. Like, he is a symbol of the emotional side of this. Whereas Pleyel is rationalism. It is what makes the most sense logically. And you see this very clearly in the explanations for that first voice that Theo hears. And so Pleyel gives a very rational explanation of, oh, you probably just thought you heard a sound, you thought it sounded like that, something was on your mind. It's a very rational explanation. Whereas Theo's like, oh no, I'm going to mood about this and get all morose about it, think about my dad and these, and it's very much there must be kind of a grander meaning to all this. And so there are your kind of big themes for this book, and so those are the things you really should. Um, be looking at for as you read through there, because for this particular things we're looking at now, you want to think about the essay question that will show up on a test or for region or state or district about the novel. It's probably going to revolve somewhere around these themes of the Gothic or alien versus belonging, national identity, or that rationalism faith aspect. So all right, so let's talk about chapters 1 through 2 first. Savannah, Clara between rationality and faith. I don't know that she comes down on either side of that throughout the entire novel. She kind of bounces back and forth, as most people do. But Pleyel and Theo are meant to kind of be the two sides of that. So. All right, so chapters 1 through 2, what's going on? Well, we get the fall of the Wielands, how we get from kind of well-to-do family back in England to not so well-to-do, to where Clara's dad ends up having to be kind of farmed out to a trader to kind of do an apprenticeship. And so he's getting farmed out. And so that's how far the Wieland family fell from kind of well-to-do status to this. And again, that's kind of that has to be for him to come to America, right? Because as I teach, I used to teach history. When I taught my kids, like rich people did not travel from England to America. That didn't make sense. Like you wouldn't immigrate from England if you were wealthy. You came because you had problems. You were looking for economic opportunity. And so the elder Wieland ends up as an apprentice. It's terrible. But he doesn't, there. And then he gets religion, right? He gets that conversion to Christianity, specifically to Protestantism. It was the French Protestants there. And the name of those French Protestants, that'll probably be a question at some point. So make sure you've got that underlined and marked in your book. And so he converts and he says, well, I'm going to go to America. And I'm going to go to America and I'm going to minister to the Native Americans because that's how I'm going to show my faith, and I think in the book it says, basically there's nothing like the passion of a convert, right? So he goes to America and forgets about the whole Native American thing and focuses in on kind of building his farm and becomes prosperous again. So he's able to build a prosperous farm, again, thanks to slaves. Thanks to his own thriftiness, but again, mostly probably the slaves, and builds up this very nice life. He gets married to into a good family. He has Clara and Theo. He kind of forgets all about that ministering to Native Americans, right? And then once he's prosperous and kind of living the life, he remembers his mission and tries to go and do that. And it doesn't go very well. Because at this point, we're now really, this is mid 1700s. The Native Americans are now kind of been pushed to the extent that they're not really welcoming that idea of conversion in the Pennsylvania-Ohio Valley. And so it just doesn't really go well. And then finally in chapter 2, we get the big spontaneous combustion moment. Although they don't call it spontaneous combustion. Basically, he goes out to that temple and set on fire supernaturally, who knows, ends up back in the house, beaten, clothes burned off, and then dies. And so this is going to be the big moment, the end of chapter 2, of the elder Wieland's death. It'll kind of loom over the kind of both children as this horrible thing that happened to their father. Now, not so horrible that they can't have their parties, as I made a meme of. They can't have their parties in the place where he basically burned to death. But no, they don't ever give you more detail about the combustion. It's left mysterious. It's supposed to be mysterious, Jalia. Uh, and yeah, that's all I can tell you. It's supposed to be mysterious. It's part of that gothic aspect. And yes, he failed to spread religion to the Native Americans. It did not go his way. How much of it was a good-hearted attempt? I mean, right? Like that's part of kind of the theory of the children, or at least of Clara, that was his punishment for failing to do his mission, for forgetting about it for so long. Yeah. So essentially, he went boom from fire. We never find out, Hubin. Um, we never find out really what actually happened with his father. I posted a meme of what actually happened with Dr. Manhattan, but that's all I got for you. Is just yeah. So that's chapters 1 and 2. So basically, chapter 1 and 2 are giving you the kind of the history of the Wieland family and the father, how he dies. It's all very tragic. And then, is there deeper purpose for keeping the death mysterious as highlighting themes? Yeah, it's that gothic theme. It's part of, if you're going to set out to write a gothic novel, Isha, you need some kind of mysterious thing in the past to kind of loom over everyone, to kind of drive the plot along. That's basically it. Have the dad die tragically, but also mysteriously, and something that could be rationally explained, but also could be supernatural. All right, so chapters 3 through 5. Well, the first thing we get is everything's fine now. They grew up and peaceful, like, everything's great. Let's see. So scrolling through my notes here. Sorry. Everything's idyllic. They're well cared for. Theo falls in love with Catherine. They were friends with Catherine for the longest time period. And we got to go from death of father to this beautiful, idyllic, pastoral setting of they're all happy and friendly and having a lovely childhood. But yeah, and so Theo marries Catherine. They're friends as a little kid, and then they grow up, and he falls in love with her. And so they get married. Now he gets married. Clara does not. She could have lived with him, but as it would be pretty typical for the 1700s for your unmarried sister to then live with you until she got married, or that was actually the only option until she got married. But Clara says, "No, y'all live here in the main house. I will live off in this other place." Adam asked, "Is this a representative of the American dream?" I think it's more kind of setting, if we're going back to that metaphor of national identity, it sets this idea of after independence, America could be this idyllic, wonderful place of youth and new hope. But if you go beyond that, again, to that alien idea, if we let outsiders kind of influence us, that's a problem. And I want you to keep that in mind when you're reading the social studies guide and you get to the Alien and Sedition Acts. Jayla and Carolina, it's a gothic novel. Nothing ever ends well. So you don't have to worry about things ending well. So then we get the big change, which is the temple conversion. And this is kind of a big thing. It's a big part of chapter 3, I believe, where we change the temple from something religious that their father intended to something very rational, very kind of in the mode, for those of you that have world history, French Revolution, where we're going to take the churches and make them temples of reason. That's essentially what we're doing here with the temple out there, right? Here's an interesting thing. Go back and look at the description of the temple and do the math on just how big it is. And what you're going to find out, because when I first read it, I didn't pay attention to the dimensions, and I pictured something else in my head. And then I went back the second read and I saw the dimensions. I sat there and did the figuring out of how everything would look. and it's super tiny. So kind of weird. And then we get the first voice. Pleyel and Theo are having an argument about some obscure Latin word, which one was correct. Then we get a reference to another discussion about a letter, and Theo goes to get it, hears his wife's voice, races back, and we get he's freaked out, like I heard my wife's voice, but she's sitting right here. And so we get the first voice. And then we get the second voice with Theo and Pleyel. Because now Pleyel had gone to Europe. He'd come back with news that Theo had inherited some land over there in Prussia. I think Prussia. And he's like, "Oh, you should go over there and get it. You should go over and lay claim to it, and you'll get wealth, and it'd be great." And Theo's like, "No, I'm good. I've got everything you could want here." And here's a good instance, and kind of keep this in mind for if you ever get an essay about kind of the rationality versus faith aspect of this is. Pleyel's being very rational about, money and what makes logical sense, what's best for the people, things. And Theo's like, I've got everything I need here. Who needs more? How much money do I really need? And so then they hear, it's like, okay, maybe I'll go. And I'm worried. Pleyel's worried about this woman he had fallen in love with in Europe. And they get the second voice that announces this woman's death. And I don't remember her name, but announces the woman's death. And Pleyel just takes it as gospel. I mean, if a booming voice told me that someone had died, maybe I'll take it. But I don't know how morose I would be about that. Yes, who would? Thank you, Teresa. And so here's the voice telling he's died. And the way Clara interprets that is, the voice kind of save Pleyel the worry of needing to go back and being absent from them. She sees that as helpful. And what you're going to find as you kind of read through this is Clara's interpretation of the voice is towards the positive that's being helpful. I think that goes with kind of that she's good-hearted and pure and wants to see it as a good thing. I don't know. Honestly, if I started hearing voices, people tell me that, and I'm assuming it's probably not a good guy. But then again, I've been raised on movies and scary stuff, so I don't know. Yes, she was married, then her husband died. Pleyel saw his chance and fell in love with her. Okay, yeah. But again, remember, people died a lot back then, so you kind of had to take your opportunities when it came. Alrighty. Then we get to chapters 6 through 9. Now here is the big entrance of Carwin. We get the big long description, and there's a ton of description here, and there's a lot of good stuff in the description that you kind of probably need to go back and reread again. Here's one of the things I do want to point out to you. In 1700s and 1800s novels especially, but even I would say even in modern novels you see this. Authors were very focused on something called physiology, and basically what it meant was you could tell someone's character by the way they looked. Like if they looked ugly, they probably had an ugly character, an ugly personality. And so when Clara is describing this and describing him, she's making all these assumptions about what a horrible person he probably is. But then she hears his voice and it's very different. And again, that sensory aspect of this is a big part of Wieland. So pay attention to the sensory parts. What Clara sees, what Clara hears. So we get the description. He's disheveled. His clothes are not nice. He walks weirdly. He has psoriasis on his nose. Like he's not someone that looks trustworthy or that's a good person. But yet, then she hears his voice and it kind of sets her aback a little. So much so that Pleyel kind of teases her that maybe she kind of has a little bit of a crush on Carwin. Yeah, Clara bursting into tears as soon as she hears his voice is so funny. Yes, it's kind of absurd, right? I have never heard anyone's voice and burst into tears. So, yeah. She is very judgmental, Adam. Very judgmental. And so then we find out she sees Carwin first before we know who he is. right? And then we get Carwin introduced, and we get Pleyel's explanation for their history, right? Met him in Spain. Pleyel was hanging around Spain, met this guy, seemed very Spanish. Turns out he's English. He was reading a text that he recognized, and they struck up a conversation, got to be close. And now Carwin's here. Why is he here? He won't tell us. And so one of the interesting parts here, and I mentioned this earlier, was Carwin's explanation of the voices. And Carwin says, mimicry is pretty common. People are able to mimic other people's voices. And that is on page 72, and pretty much, if you pay close attention, explains everything that's about to happen, and it has already happened. You'll just have to figure it out. Or wait till the end, or you can go read a summary. And what we end up with at the very end is Clara has feelings for Pleyel. Clara cannot declare her feelings for Pleyel because that would not be appropriate. Clara hopes that Pleyel has feelings for her, and she thinks he does, especially now that he knows that this love interest back in Europe is dead, or he thinks she's dead. And so she's kind of planning this out in her head, and maybe some of us have done this before, right? Where you're like, okay, I'm gonna see this person, and he's gonna walk me home across this stream, and he's going to confess his love for me, and I'm going to be able to tell him that, yes, I feel the same. Like, she has a sincere crush on her sister-in-law's older brother, her best friend, or her brother's best friend, basically. And I'm trying to think if it's by chapter 9, if it's confirmed yet. No, I don't think it's been confirmed yet, but he still kind of suspects. But yeah, I can't express this without shame. Yeah, it just wouldn't be appropriate, right? It just wouldn't be appropriate. Now, I know that's confusing for some people in the modern day. Back in the 1700s, there were all these rules for women about what you were allowed to admit and how much you could put yourself out there. And so she goes to the practice of the play they're doing, again at the temple where their father burned to death. And Pleyel doesn't show. And she's like, oh, what could keep him? And she's going through all these things in her head, like, did he have an accident? Was he called away? Did he forget? And then she gets more and more depressed. Well, then she goes home and early and goes to get a lantern and then to a book, finds her closet. The door won't open. And then she finds Carwin in her closet. Now, yes, Clara overthinks a lot, Woozy. Absolutely. That is another. There's another 19th century novel called Lady Audley's Secret. It's great. It has a male narrator instead of a female narrator, but it's kind of along the same lines of this. The guy overthinks everything, and overthinking everything makes everything worse, just like Clara does. And so, yes, that's going to be a big part of all this for the rest of the book. Clara overthinking everything and making everything worse. And so she goes home, finds Carwin in her closet, and there's no real reason for him to be there. Now, he never comes out and actually says that he was going to rape her, but basically he insinuates that he came there to dishonor her, and he was stopped by the voice. There's another voice, and then he leaves the house, and that's kind of where we end. And what we end up with at the end of this is Pleyel and Clara and Carwin, kind of a unwilling love triangle here that you're going to see going into chapters 10 and on. Is we've got Pleyel. What are his feelings for Clara? We know Clara's feelings for Pleyel. We know Clara's feelings about Carwin, kinda, but especially after she finds him in her closet, we definitely know her feelings. We suspect Carwin's feelings for Clara, and it's this very weird love triangle. Yeah, and that's where you're going to go from there. And no, by the end of chapter 9, we don't have any explanation for the voices again, unless you've already figured it out. Yeah, and so That's where we're at. And we didn't even touch on the two people in Clara's closet discussing her murder. That has to be one of the weirdest scenes of a book I've read recently, where you're just laying there in your bed and you're overhearing two people in your closet discussing how to murder you. And you're sitting there rationally figuring out, like, why would they be discussing it? Like, does it really matter which way they kill me, shoot me, stab me? I don't know. Why would they want to kill me? Who are these people? I'm pure and innocent Clara. I've never harmed anyone. Um, eh, why would they want to kill me? We never get a good answer to that. And what's worse, Clara never tells anybody that this happened. And again, a lot later wouldn't happen if she had just told people, but hey, that's Clara for you. All right. So let's get ready for questions. And so let's hear your answers. Let's take a look at our first question. Give the delay a little bit. All right. So how many years was the elder Wieland apprenticed? Let's see who answers that. And I'm going to keep a note because some lucky person is going to get my notes from the book. Are the identities of the two people kept secret? Just put your answer in the chat. I'll get it. The two people kept secret. Yeah, we never find out who the two people are. Well, you kind of do later, so don't worry about that. God Emperor, King of Kingship of Nerds. 7 is correct. Nice job, God Emperor. What team are you with? Sorry, just waiting on God Emperor to tell me what team he's with so I can make a note here in case I draw his name to send my notes to. They're very good notes. Erkner. Awesome. Know your coach very well as well. All right, here's question 2. What words from the French Protestant's book struck the elder Wieland and convinced him of his path, convinced him to convert, convinced him where he was supposed to go? It's a very famous line from the Bible that everyone in the 1700s would have known. Let's see, Box Fox, you are correct. What school are you from? Taylor. Awesome. All right, next question. How many columns make up the outside perimeter of the temple? Ayushi, yes, absolutely correct. 12. Now, what's interesting about that, I did the math on that just to kind of see. Ayushi, if you'll tell me what school you're from while I explain this. Um, the diameter of the temple's 12 feet. So you obviously can figure out the circumference of the temple with that. And then you figure out 12 columns. You'll find out they're about 3 feet, depending on how big the columns are. They're about 3 feet apart. So, yeah, it's not a very big temple. It's kind of small. Uh, yeah, I'm just going with whatever shows up in my chat first. So, uh, don't worry. Everyone, I mean, other people are welcome to share my notes when they get them. It's fine. It's nothing special. Probably you'll get cram kits that are better than mine. All right, and there is real no cash value to this prize. A bust of what historical figure is placed in the temple when Clara and Theo begin using it? Box Euro 1, Bo Geek 3. You're the winner with that one. First one there. If you'll tell me what school you're from. And Cicero is correct. Anybody know who Cicero is? I wait on Bo Geek to tell me what school they're from. Dobie. Yeah, Roman orator. He was a senator, writer, scholar, that kind of thing. Cool. All right. Well, that is now 6:45. That was fast paced. Next Thursday, we'll look at 10 through 18. We finally get murders next time, so we'll talk about murders. Lots of death happens, and yeah, some pretty horrific scenes coming up here. So thank you all for showing up. I hope you're enjoying your summer. I hope you're getting lots of reading done. This is going to be an amazing Actic year with a great topic, um, and an amusing book at, at the very least. So thank you guys. We're going to end the stream now. I will see, hopefully, all of you. Tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on Twitter. More cool stuff coming later on as we go through the summer and into the fall. And I will see you again next. See you guys next time.